the puppet master, the Joker, the fool they call X. Kiyotaka Ayanokoji from Classroom of the Elite, a boy trained in silence, bred in a room without light. And opposite to him, Kira, the god of the new world, a high schooler with a pen, a notebook, and a plan to cleanse humanity. But forget fists and magic. This is a battle of writing and intellect. Who is better written and who would win in a war of minds? Who's better written? So how we judge writing? Writing is often called subjective, but that's not the full story. We're using a system called axiology, a philosophy of value. Think of it as literary architecture. Characters are judged across key pillars like narrative role, theme integration, psychological depth, and originality. This literary axiology wheel is composed of narrative function, growth and transformation, reader connection, trope subversion, contemporary themes, and analytical layers. The analytical layers themselves are usually split into a micro, meso, and macro sort of analysis, but I'm going to go with a more general approach here for the sake of simplicity. So, narrative function, which has a weighted score of around 20%. Ayanokoji, he is the invisible architect of the entire narrative. His presence reshapes arcs without active participation, making him a passive catalyst, a rare but complex structure when executed well. His restraint, for example, is in letting others take credit, which elevates secondary characters while letting him maintain control as the ultimate puppet master. He's around 17 out of 20. Light Yagami is a perfect 20 out of 20. Every major event stems from Light's moral choices. The narrative bends with his descent. He's not just the protagonist, he is the conflict itself. His ideological clash with L and Nier, and Mello, defines the structure and tone of the story. Light will take this with an edge, central to the story's moral and psychological spiral, almost like anime's version of Walter White from Breaking Bad. Growth and transformation with a weighted score again of 20%. Ayanokoji is around 14 out of 20, and that's because his development is mainly internal and interpretive. He starts as a perfect emotionless machine, although there is some nuance to this. He isn't truly emotionless. It's more of he cannot express his emotions well, but they are there and they are colourful. But through slow interactions, he more genuinely, with others, manages to perform these emotions without the performance. But he still plays within mask, and this leads up to around volume 10.75 in year 2, where he has a whole monologue about manipulation, his fascination with it. It's interesting to see that perspective, but in a way, it shows his conflict, which we'll get into. The shift is slow burn and open to interpretation, as some see it as stagnation, while others as a concealed awakening. 14 out of 20. Like Yagami, he starts off as a moral idealist, but he becomes a megalomaniac, god-complex tyrant. His arc is Shakespearean tragedy, meeting Nietzschean Übermensch. By the end, his original goals have eroded, completely morally bankrupt, leaving a naked hunger for power. that is the void that Light became. 19 out of 20 for Light, because it's more clearer and deeper change across the narrative. So Light's gonna take this. Reader connection weight, 15%. Ayanokoji's 13 out of 15. For introverts, social realists, and strategy-minded viewers, he's incredibly compelling. However, his inaccessibility and emotional coldness limits emotional connection for general audiences. With Light, 14 out of 15. Whether you love him, whether you hate him, everyone reacts to Light. His ideals hook you. His dissent disturbs you. You're always engaged, even when you disagree. It's like, with Light, you're always questioning, well, you know, he comes from a good place, but obviously the execution is not the best, but we don't disagree with the place he comes from. The edges to Light. But Ayanokoji is exceptional for a niche connection, I will say that. Subversion of tropes. Weight of 15%. Ayanokoji subverts the quiet genius archetype by hiding beneath mediocrity. Defies every expectation of a traditional shonen or light novel protagonist. Even in manipulation scenes, he hides from the camera, which is almost a meta subversion. 14 out of 15 for Ayanokoji. Light is 12 out of 15. He initially subverts a justice-loving student, but becomes what every anti-hero later imitates. So he loses subversive power due to later cliches being based on him. The edge is going to go to Ayanokoji. He updates subversion for a more modern, post-Lelouch audience. Contemporary themes with a weight of 15%. Ayanokoji explores themes like meritocracy as oppression, the illusion of equality, societal masks and institutional control, education as a background, and also showcasing hyper-competitive academic context in Japan itself. He's more subtler and more philosophical. 13 out of 15 for Ayanokoji. Like Yagami, 14 out of 15. His themes are moral absolutism, vigilantism versus justice, media manipulation, godhood, power, and ego in a triadic system. And these hit harder in a global context, but are less systemic than Ayanokoji, so Ayanokoji's more precise. I'd say, honestly, even though I gave the edge to Light, I'd say it's more of a tie, because I think it depends on whether you prefer philosophical critique, so that would be Ayanokoji, or moral philosophy, which is Light. Analytical layers, which is a weight of 15% here. So Ayanokoji can be interpreted through the Nietzschean master-slave morality, the Jungian persona versus shadow should be relatively obvious, Cold War statecraft that might actually be more nuanced, which is basically the White Room as a authoritarian experimentation. And then obviously you have the basic analysis you can do, which is the Stanford prison experiment. And then the educational critique on hidden hierarchies that are formed in society. So 14 out of 15 for Koji. And then for Light, 15 out of 15. Pretty much perfect here with his Faustian myth, Christian theology. So Kira as Lucifer, L as Christ, obviously. Hobbesian statecraft. Freudian, I guess you could say Light as Judas as well, so kind of serves double roles, which kind of makes sense. He's a dualistic character. Hobbesian statecraft, Freudian repression, and nihilism versus humanism. The edge to Light, but both are extremely dense and open to layered analysis. Honestly, underrated in that regard. I think Light especially, because his format is a anime manga, those tend to be under-analyzed because people don't really know the tools to analyze them. But yeah, they just analyze it in a more traditionally literary manner. So to summarize, the final axiology scores out of 100. Narrative function 17 for Koji, 20 for light. Growth and transformation 14 for Koji, 19 for light. Reader connection 13 for Koji, 14 for light. Subversion of tropes 14 for Koji, 12 for light. Contemporary themes 13 for Koji, 14 for light. Analytical layers 14 for Koji, 15 for light. So the total is 85 for Koji and 94 for light. So like Yagami is the better written character. He's mythic, emotionally charged, and philosophically complete. Ayanokoji's more clinical, subtle, and strategic, arguably deeper in a realistic portrayal, but he's less affecting in drama. Ayanokoji also has an evolving character arc, so we'll see what Kiyotaka cooks up with him. So, now we're going to get into the intelligence breakdown. So, as an overview, we assess intelligence across 4 high-level metacognitive categories. General cognitive intelligence, also known as GCI, which is a weight of 25%, which is going to be raw IQ, analytical power, working memory, abstraction, spatial logic. Scenario optimization, 25% as well. Ability to create plans under varying constraints and to account for unknowns. Information control, same thing. Misdirection, deception, surveillance, countermeasures, truth distortion. Metacognition and foresight, 25%. Also, again, understanding one's own mind, predicting others' reasoning, nested planning. So general cognitive intelligence, Ayanokoji is going to take this with a 10 over light's 9.7. Should be pretty intuitive, but just to remind you guys, Ayanokoji solved advanced game theory problems as a child in the White Room. He demonstrated understanding of high-level political theory, neurobiology, military psychology, and AI design, among many other things. At age 6, he was already outperforming adults in cognitive testing. His deductive bandwidth operates beyond human norms, not just in planning, but in processing layered contingencies in real time. So Ayanokoji does this sort of processing on the spot that light would take a week to do, when we can actually see that actually. He's genuinely a super intelligence in a more realistic, grounded verse, and that's interesting because super intelligence as an analogy is what we're trying to strive for AI, but Ayanokoji already has that as a human, so it should be pretty obvious. Light, though, we can talk about him. He has genius IQ, ranked top in Japan, aces all academic and psychological categories. He cracks L's strategic traps and builds logic-layered contingency plans. However, he does overestimate himself at times, and some reasoning depends heavily on emotional manipulation or Death Note specific features. Occasional lapses in humility or overconfidence, for example, of Nier. So the verdict is, while Light is brilliant, Ayanokoji's sheer mental acceleration and cross-domain supremacy places him slightly ahead, or more than slightly even. Scenario optimization. So this is going to be a tie actually. I think they're pretty relative in this regard. They're both around 9.85. Ayanokoji builds multiple contingency paths in the Zodiac survival test, even predicting breakdowns in student hierarchy and loyalty. He subverts school systems without being noticed. He creates multi-path outcomes during the Island Cruise arc and just other special exams. So Year 2 Island exam, which was a very complex scenario, mind you. There's plenty of arcs you could draw from. Light, he created amnesia gambits, triple fake identities, and nested rule traps. He engineered the FBI reverse takedown, Naomi Misura's death, and L's collapse. Extreme resource optimization under high surveillance, for example, the famous potato chip camera trick. So, yeah, they both operate in different spheres, but they're equally flawless at optimizing high-risk plans. Information control. This is easily going to go to Light over Koji with a 10 in comparison to a 9.6. Light masters multi-layered deception. He hides supernatural means while weaponizing them. He fools Near, L, the FBI, Naomi Misura, and even Rem, a death god Shinigami, who should not operate under conventional logic. He creates false rules, manipulates surveillance, and controls his public image on a mass scale. He leads the investigation team without suspicion, so he was literally on the team that were investigating him. Ayanokoji controls perception while barely speaking or acting. Which, mind you, I would think that would be kind of suspicious after a while, but each to their own. He plays classmates, teachers, and school administration simultaneously. He rarely slips, but doesn't engage in global level theater like Light does. So Light's scale and complexity of misdirection gives him the edge. If I ever do a Light video, could probably expand more on this, but I'm pretty sure there are just plenty of docs, or there will be a really good doc in the future that will show this. Metacognition and foresight, so this is also going to be a tie. They're both around 9.75. Ayanokoji understands his own motives as layered masks, so this is like, he crafts emotional personas as tools, deconstructs identity through recursive introspection, and predicts his emotional shifts, so for example how far he is from attachment or domination. Light simulates L's logic, for example in a tennis game, anticipates Near's counterlays and builds recursive mental traps, reflects on himself as a god and later as a failure in the end, ultimately undone by pride and inability to recognize Near's final move. They're equally self-aware but fail in opposite directions, so they're completely opposite in the way they fail. So yeah, the total average is going to be 9.8 for Koji and 9.825 for Light. So Light just edges out in the general intelligence metrics. Now we're going to go into the tiered performance analysis, so how they would actually do when we measure them in terms of tiering and performance-based outsmarting. So in Tier 1, so that's tactics, TAC, so local tactical duels, these are like one-on-ones or micro-manipulations. Light's elite tactics with bus hijacking. He tricks an armed criminal, feigns panic, and manipulates an FBI agent to reveal their identity. Ayanokoji, really underrated. He has really complex tactics, but in terms of a Tier 1, this would be Hashimoto reversal. So during a confrontation, he flips suspicion by feigning ignorance and using conversational control. This was really elite tactical display on a Tier 1 scale. Psychological insight, Ayanokoji's Karizawa breakdown. He understands her trauma deeply enough to dismantle her defiance and rebuild her identity around him. Light is going to be his REM manipulation mainly. He leverages Rem's emotional loyalty to Misa to have her kill L. Opponent complexity, so, well, this is going to be pretty obvious. Light matching wits with L in layered psychological games, their whole cat and mouse. Ayanokoji, he outsmarts Tsukishiro, an adult White Room operative assassin even, with indirect tactics. Tsukishiro is someone who's used to navigating complex political scenarios on the global stage and the national stage. But yeah, so if you're curious, Ayanokoji has the superior psychological insight, but Light to the other two. And Light is winning narrowly with a 189.1 versus 185.2. So Light's 185.2, Light's 189.1 and Koji's 185.2. There we go. In terms of strategic intelligence, so these are going to be multi-agent operations. Adaptation velocity, so Light responds in real time to L, Near, Mellow, REM, and global surveillance, constantly rebalancing his approach. Ayanokoji navigates the Zodiac survival chaos, predicting factional breakdowns and responses. You can also just see a ton of different examples for Ayanokoji, even greater than this, honestly. Such as Year 2 Island Exam. Creative innovation. So Light executes the memory loss plan with Rem and Higuchi, a multi-stage plan involving supernatural loopholes. Very famous plan that I defended too. Ayanokoji creates the class transfer plan. Not as famous, but it's relatively famous from a micro perspective. He quietly destabilized the power balance among the top school factions, creating the puppet state in literally every single class, so he could transfer to anyone he wanted. Quite an unpredictable plan, quite invincible. Koenji did deduce the plan, or maybe just figured it out through sheer intuition. But yeah, it was still invincible for the most part. Multi-agent complexity, so Light orchestrates outcomes of the task force, Misa, L, Rem, and then Nier under different levels of trust. Ayanokoji balances and manipulates Ichika, Ichinose, Horakita, Sakayanagi, Reelan, and the administration of Advanced Nurturing High School itself. So the winner is Light's 200 versus Ayanokoji's 186.4. And for the overkill, tier 2.5, Ayanokoji doesn't even reach this scale yet, but Light does with his ideological and institutional control. So Light becomes Kira, a global myth, creating a theology of punishment and fear. He uses fear to change public media, law enforcement, and international protocol. He permanently, he ends all world wars, or all wars in general, pretty much, and significantly lowers the crime rate globally. In terms of psychological hegemony, Light leaves behind an entire religion and legacy of fear after death. So that's just the easy free 200 points for Light. So Light's going to be the smart character here overall in terms of higher scaling. But we can actually see this in scenario simulations. So some set conditions, no supernatural abilities obviously. 1 month of prep, the objective is just to neutralize the opponent. So I think in a short-term battle, around 1 month, Light's gonna frame Ayanokoji using legal, media, and ethical warfare, using performance and ideology to draw him into exposure. Ayanokoji's gonna attempt to remain unseen and manipulate from the shadows, but he simply lacks the time to dismantle Light's established web of influence. So Light's gonna win on the short term, but on the long term, so if this goes to around 6+ months, Ayanokoji's gonna infiltrate Light's circle, slowly isolating him from key resources, exploiting Light's ego and eventual tunnel vision. Light's gonna decline, he's gonna become arrogant, overextend his power, eventually collapse under recursive psychological sabotage. So Ayanokoji's gonna win that scenario long term. There are other scenarios like manipulating a country, which I think Light will take. Manipulating a small faction, Ayanokoji will take that. Survival hunt, Ayanokoji, he completely disappears. He wins that pretty easily. Flipping an ally, Ayanokoji if it's one-on-one, Light if it's more public. If they teamed up, Light is the face, Ayanokoji's gonna be the hand. So the final verdict, Light is the bright explosion. Fast, dramatic, overwhelming. Ayanokoji is a hidden edge, slow, patient, lethal. Almost like a sun and moon dynamic. In writing, Light wins. In intelligence, Ayanokoji kinda has the edge, but Light obviously wins. He's a higher scaled character in terms of performance-based outsmarting and even just general intelligence. In execution, it depends on the time scale in terms of when we actually see this intelligence manifest. So, which mastermind do you guys go with? Leave your take in the comments, feel free. Feel free to talk to me further about the matchup. You can like, subscribe, and share for more elite matchups and detailed videos as well. I have a huge project coming very soon, but until next time, this is C signing off. Light Yagami wins the Master Manipulator and a mass-scale tactician in the end, with his plans being theatrical, divine, and historic in scope. Ayanokoji wins in raw intellectual horsepower and his surgical strategic control. He's a one-man silent revolution. So, on paper, Ayanokoji, I think the matchup is literally this. Ayanokoji on paper edges ahead. In terms of execution, the domain determines the victor, and Light is superior in execution. And I think most people can't visualize and abstract the actual domain itself and the execution of the intelligence, and they just look at on paper, which Ayanokoji is like, well, I said, super intelligent. Anyway, that's all from me. Bye.